There is a motorcycle you can walk into a dealership and buy today, brand new, with a factory warranty that has a Chevrolet V8 in it. Not a car engine adapted for a motorcycle. Not a custom one-off built in somebody's shed for a magazine article. An ordinary small block Chevrolet, the same family of engine that has been going into pickup trucks and Camaros for 60 years, bolted into a production motorcycle by a company that has been doing it since 1990. It makes 445 horsepower. For comparison, a modern Litre superbike. The kind of machine that is genuinely frightening to ride quickly. Makes around 200. A big touring cruiser, the heaviest thing most riders will ever sit on, makes somewhere between 80 and 100. This thing makes 445 and 445 foot-pounds of torque along with it. And the strangest part is not any of that. The strangest part is that it works, it is legal, people ride them on ordinary roads, and the company that builds them has been quietly doing it for 35 years. Start with the man. Monte Warne built the first one in Dyersburg, Tennessee in 1990. The idea was exactly what it looks like. Put a proper American V8 in a motorcycle and see what happens. That sentence has been said in 1,000 garages. Almost every version of it ends with a machine that runs badly for one summer, gets photographed, and is quietly dismantled. What separates this one is that it did not stop there. Warne built a second. Then he built them for other people. By the middle of the 1990s, the operation was turning out around 300 vehicles a year, and by 2006 it had sold more than 4,000. 4,000. That is not a novelty. That is a motorcycle company. The company builds motorized tricycles alongside the motorcycles for customers who want the engine without the balancing act. The shop in Tennessee is now a manufacturing facility of 22,000 square feet, and the machines leave it with vacuum-formed body panels, investment cast frame components, and inverted front forks. The same specification language you would read on any serious motorcycle, applied to something with a truck engine in the middle. Now, the engineering. The moment you decide to put a V8 in a motorcycle, you inherit a set of problems that have nothing to do with power and everything to do with what power does to everything around it. The first is the gearbox, and this is the part most people get wrong when they imagine the machine. A motorcycle gearbox is a small, beautiful, highly stressed thing. 5 or 6 speeds, close ratios, designed around an engine that makes its power high in the rev range and needs to be kept there. Feed 445 foot-pounds into a transmission like that and you will be picking pieces of it out of the road. So there isn't one. The Boss Hoss has 2 speeds. 2, plus reverse. And it does not need more, which is the interesting bit. A V8 of this size makes enormous torque from almost no revs at all. The reason a motorcycle needs 6 gears is that a small engine has to be kept spinning to make anything happen. An engine with this much displacement does not have that problem. It pulls from idle, in either gear, in a way that no conventional motorcycle engine can. The transmission is semi-automatic. There is no clutch lever to work in traffic. Final drive is by belt. Then there is the reverse gear, and it is worth sitting with that for a second, because a reverse gear on a motorcycle sounds like a joke until you understand why it is there. The machine weighs over 1,000 pounds. That is not a figure most riders have any intuition for. A big touring motorcycle, a full-dress Goldwing or an Electra Glide, the kind of bike people describe as heavy, is around 800. This is heavier than that, by a margin, with all of the weight sitting high and centered around a lump of cast iron. You cannot walk it backwards out of a parking space. Nobody can. So it has a reverse gear, the way a small car does, and you use it for exactly the same reason. If you are enjoying this, subscribing helps the channel more than it looks like it does. So what is it actually like? Here is where I want to be straight with you, because there is a version of this video that pretends the machine is perfect, and the truth is more interesting than that. In a straight line, it is extraordinary. A newer 2-speed will do a quarter mile in under 10 seconds, which puts it in the company of genuinely fast cars while being a motorcycle. The torque means it does not need to be revved or worked or ridden hard to feel violent. It simply goes from anywhere in any gear. The vibration is not what you expect either. A big V8 at low revs, in a chassis of that mass, is smoother than a large twin. The weight that makes it awkward at walking pace makes it very calm at speed. The seat is low, 28 inches, lower than most cruisers, because the whole machine had to be built around keeping that engine's mass as low as physics allowed. And then there is the handling. Riders who have spent time on them do not agree with each other, and the disagreement is honest. Some describe the weight as reassuring once moving, a sort of freight train stability. Others put it more bluntly, that the handling is heavy, that it is hard work, and that the work gets in the way of enjoying the ride. Both of those can be true. This is a motorcycle with more than 1,000 pounds and 400 horsepower, and no amount of engineering makes that behave like a middleweight. Everything it does well and everything it does badly comes from the same decision. Then there is the problem of putting that power on the road. A motorcycle tire is a curved section. It has to be, because a motorcycle leans, and the contact patch has to travel around the shoulder of the tire as it goes over. That curve is why a motorcycle tire is narrow relative to what it has to do. You cannot simply make it wider without ruining how it turns. 445 foot-pounds arriving at a normal motorcycle tire is not a serious proposition. So the rear of this machine is enormous, wide in a way that looks wrong in photographs until you understand what is being asked of it, and the whole geometry of the bike is arranged around that decision. Everything about this motorcycle is like that. One choice at the start, the engine. And every other component spends the rest of its life accommodating it. And then there is stopping. This is the part that gets least attention and deserves the most. Braking is not about power, it is about mass and speed. A machine that weighs more than 1,000 pounds, traveling at road speed, carries an amount of energy that has to go somewhere, and the only place it can go is into brake discs and the air around them. The engineering answer is more brake, bigger discs, more pistons, more surface area. But there is no answer to the physics itself. A heavy machine stops in a longer distance than a light one, every time, on every surface, and no specification sheet changes that. Which is why the riders who get on best with these machines describe riding them differently. Not slower, necessarily. Further ahead. You read the road earlier because you have to, and the machine rewards being ridden by somebody thinking 30 seconds into the future rather than 3. Which brings us to the real question about this machine, and it is not why. It is why did it last? Because plenty of people have put car engines in motorcycles. The Munch Mammoth did it in Germany in the 60s with an NSU car engine, and it bankrupted its creator more than once. There have been V8 specials, turbine specials, rocket specials, machines built to prove a point at a show and then forgotten. That is the normal fate of an idea like this. This one has been in continuous production for 35 years. Part of the answer is that Warne did not build a prototype. He built a product. Warranty, dealers, parts, a factory. The engine choice helps enormously here too, and it is the quietly clever part of the whole thing. A small block Chevrolet is possibly the most supported engine in the history of the internal combustion engine. Parts are everywhere. Anybody can work on one. Ordering a replacement is a phone call. Compare that with a hand-built exotic where a broken component means a machine shop and 6 months, and you can see why one of them survived and the others became museum pieces. The other part of the answer is simply that there was a customer, not a large one. 300 a year is a rounding error next to Honda. But it turns out there are, reliably, a few hundred people every year who want the largest, loudest, most unreasonable motorcycle that can legally be sold to them, and who are not interested in being told it is impractical. They know it is impractical. That is the point. There is a lesson buried in this that has nothing to do with V8s. Most impossible motorcycles fail not because the idea was bad, but because the person who had it built one and stopped. The Boss Haus exists because somebody treated an absurd idea as an engineering problem with a supply chain, a warranty, and a dealer network attached. And then did that for 3 decades. It is the least sensible motorcycle you can buy new. It is also, and this is the part nobody expects, one of the few genuinely mad machines in motorcycling that you can order, take delivery of, and get serviced. Because the man who built the first one never treated it as a joke.